happy Independence Day to you all. Yeah, warmly welcome to today's panel discussion and very special Independence Day webinar that is organized by the Center for Security Policy and Research. And I think today's topic is one of utmost importance as we are going to assess Ghana's security challenges with reference to our pre-independence struggle and as we have it now. So moving forward, I think we all know that Ghana has gone through a number of struggles, a number of revolutions to get where we are now. And today we can boldly say that we are celebrating our 65th anniversary, and we were the first sub-Saharan country in colonial Africa to gain liberation from the whites. So without spending so much time, I would want to introduce our speakers for this discussion. So we have Mr. Edmund Akoto Bamfo, who happens to be the Executive Director for CSPR, that is the Center for Security Policy and Research, who is going to help us as an expert in security to understand the various happenings that went on before Ghana was able to gain independence and what is currently happening now in terms of security and the mechanisms that we have in place to ensure that we are ready and under utmost protection when it comes to security matters. And on the other hand, we have Mr. Noah Tetteh, Noah Ephraem Adamtey Tetteh, who is a lawyer, and he's currently a global citizenship fellow with White and Case LLP. And if you did not know, he also happens to be a very brilliant historian. So I think that we are in the right hands and in the right course. So to start with you, Edmund, as I already said, we are discussing Ghana's security challenges. We are assessing it from our pre-independence era and how we have it now, the various legal frameworks that we have in place, and then we are also trying to understand the socioeconomic impacts that these security threats that we either had or we still even may have on our socioeconomic development as a country. So, Edmund, can you kindly take us through some of the series of security uprisings or revolutions that took place before we're able to gain independence?
I'll start by saying I'll defer from calling myself an expert in anything. I have not yet gained expertise, so I'm striving for daily advancements in everything I do. But I will attempt to briefly give a background to your question, in answer to your question. Ghana's current security challenges are mostly internally generated. Seldom do we have security challenges, particularly for Ghana, that are externally generated. The national security strategy that we use currently identifies electoral violence as one of the key possible triggers of violence in the country. And it is not germane, it is not new. For the struggle of independence, I think very notable, and I think Noah will correct me if I make any error, very notable event that changed the tide of our independence struggle was the 1948 riot. That riot triggered a series of legislations, a series of elections, a series of measures put in place to expedite self-rule. But it wasn't just to expedite self-rule, it was to make sure that the incidents that led to the 1948 riots will not recur. when committees were formed to look into it, they recommended legislation and further policies. Since the arrival of the Europeans, they don't just get up and decide to revise something that is already on the books. It is normally triggered by an incident. Either there are demonstrations or there are agitations or something. And then a committee looking into it, or through the investigation, they realize that there's some defects in the status quo. And then recommendations will be made. Recommendations are made. And then we've arrived where we are. There are certain things, even on the current books, and I am not a lawyer. I know I'm in the midst of law students and people who specialize in law, but I can boldly say to some degree of certainty that there are some things on our legal books that are direct lessons learned from previous regimes. For example, the law telling us that Parliament shall not make a law making Ghana a one-party state is because at some point Ghana was a one-party state, and there were security ramifications that we suffered. So our security situation has not totally changed. The players may have changed, but there are a lot of lessons we can learn from our history, both distant and recent. And I think as the discussion goes on, we'll zoom into particulars, particular lesson, particular incidents that we can draw parallels from and learn lessons from. So to open, this is what I would like to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Edmund. And I'm happy to hear that you started off by talking about the riots, because Ghana went through the riots, the strikes and boycott of British rule and all that. So I think now I would want us to hear from Noah if he has any addition to what you just mentioned.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think Mr. Edmund has said almost everything there is to say concerning this particular question. Like he rightly said, Ghana has not really suffered an outward threat to our security during the time of colonization, immediately before independence, and even after independence. He mentioned that almost all our threats have been internally generated. The 1948, February 1948 marks one of the turning points in Ghana's history, constitutional history, if I may put it that way, because that was the time that we had an internal situation which called for a close look at the grievances of Ghanaians, especially persons who belong to the military section and fought side by side with the British during the World War. And also the time that we faced an internal threat to our security, which really called for a general national attention to the problem. So our problems over the years have always been, security problems or challenges have always been internally generated. And like Akoto rightly said, it's led to a lot of legislation and a lot of policies to address this. Now, one important thing or lesson that I think we learned from 1948 and what happened from that time till 1957 when Ghana gained independence is aptly put by Nkrumah on his midnight speech on the 5th of March 1957. Now, in that speech, Nkrumah stated that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the liberation of the entire African continent. Now, the reason why the 1948 riot was important and also a well of lesson is that after that incident, Nkrumah's already held ideology was brought to the forefront that there is the need for us to set ourselves apart from the British linkage towards our security apparatus. Nkrumah believed that for us to be liberated, we shouldn't only be liberated in our socioeconomic issues, we should also be liberated in our security and especially in our military apparatus. So that will form the basis of Nkrumah's ideals and his ideas concerning our security both internal and external, from 1957 even up to now. But when we go to Ghana's constitutional history, we realize that a lot of the provisions we find on security in our constitution, in many legislation, draw a lot of inspiration from the occurrences from 1948 and through the tenure of Nkrumah. So yes, we've not had any major external threat to our security, but mainly it's been internal matters, and these internal challenges have given us a lot of lessons to shape our security. So also, as a way of introduction, I'll say that this is what I would say concerning the first question that you just put up.
Thank you very much, Noah. Thank you very much. So my question also required that we talk about the actual incidences that happened. And then you rightly mentioned that Ghana has not really had a major security threat, and most of our security issues were internally generated. Would you say that there were some legal frameworks that were put in place to make sure that these happenings were not so much to the extent of overly affecting the citizens or being externally generated?
Yeah, so one important thing, or one main important reason why Ghana never faced any external challenges, one was that during the period before independence, okay, what we had in Ghana was basically our police service, and then our military. But the military presence in Ghana was made up of a lot of British personnel. Actually, the main leaders of the military in Ghana were British. There were very few instances where you see a Black person or a Ghanaian heading any department in the military. It was mainly the British personnel. So one important thing about that is that it's, in a way, because the British had their post in Ghana, it was difficult for any external force to attempt any form of insurgency or any form of armed attack within the country. And that is very crucial, because we realized also that it's one of the reasons why Nkrumah actually had to allow British personnel in our army for a long period. And right before his overthrow from office was when Nkrumah had actually passed a directive to get all the British personnel out of our army. Before that, that directive was passed by Nkrumah, although there were rumors, there were suspicions that people were planning coup, and there had been incidents for which committees had even been set up to investigate. We had not seen any major internal security infraction before the British personnel left our shores. So one important thing we realized was that security in Ghana was very pivotal. And with the organization of we having the British also present in Ghana, it helped thwart any form of external attempts or external even thinking to cause any insurgency or have any armed attack against the territorial sovereignty of Ghana. We did not have that. Internally, after 1948, we also see that by reason of we having a serious British military presence in Ghana, together with the Ghanaians in the military, we did not have any external insurgencies, and we also did not have any internal security challenges even during that period. So between 1948 through to independence, before 1966, when we have the coup, we did not have any of these issues. Now, it tells us that although there were not really massive legislation passed, okay, to provide for security, because the security apparatuses in the country were efficient, internally, we did not see any strife. Now, it would be an important point, I'm sure later when we have to discuss the effect of that and then the current trends in the country, for us to realize that even now that we have so many laws and so many security agencies in Ghana,